Today, I'm sitting on the bank of Lake Zurich for the C.G. Jung's Institute Winter Block. And I wanted to talk about what it actually feels like to live guided by your dreams and how anxiety and depression can sometimes be signals pointing you back to yourself. What if they weren't just problems to fix, but messages trying to guide you? Let's look at this through a Jungian lens. I'll tell you a whole bunch of stories about how my dreams have led me here.
Welcome to Chiron Art Therapy. I'm Maggie Colwell, an art therapist and Jungian. Here we explore archetypal images, personal symbolism in art and dreams, and what your psyche is trying to tell you. If you're ready to dive into your inner world, you're in the right place. Subscribe, and let's begin.
I really try to live my life based on how my dreams are guiding me in my personal life development process, as well as my process through my Jungian training at the Institute. I wanted to give some examples of what that looks like and what it feels like to be aligned with the internal music of your own soul. It's a very different thing. I almost don't want to call it therapy because psychoanalysis is not psychotherapy. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Jungian world. Last week, we had talked about how anxiety can be a guide and a voice toward helping you reconnect with your body, helping you reconnect with your intuition, and helping you wake up to things you need to pay attention to, but may have been cut off from due to just life circumstances, our culture that only wants you to think and not have connection with your body, all of the people telling you what you should do and how to be good and what everybody's expectations are and what your obligations are that kind of divorce us from ourselves. That anxiety can be the, no, I really mean it. You got to listen. Hello. With that in mind, I wanted to talk briefly about depression as well, because in psychoanalysis, that is a similar type of a concept, is that when we need to make really big changes from an internal structural standpoint, what I mean by that is what our values are, how we think, how we use our energy, what our decision-making process is. A lot of that is unconscious and instinctual with what we consider normal or what home base looks. When we need to make huge changes because from an internal place, we've gotten off track with who we are and what life is supposed to be about for us as a unique human being, a depression can come to pull in our energy, take it out of the world, reduce the amount of activity that we're doing out in the world so that we can hear what's going on internally and use that energy in what Jung called an alchemical process to be able to change our internal world so that then we can go back out into the world. Maureen Murdoch, who wrote The Heroine's Journey, she said that unlike the hero's journey, where the young man goes out in the world to seek his fortune, has to have an underworld journey, has an experience, an encounter in the underworld, then after he has bested the monsters in the underworld, goes back into integration and then returns home. That's the stereotypical masculine journey, and that is pervasive in our culture in a lot of movies. Maureen Murdoch says that a lot of times the women's journey starts with grief and of separating from the world to figure out who she is. And that's a very different process of going into the body, of going into the earth, of reconnection, rather than going out into the world to seek one's fortune. So how I'm starting this is that depression isn't necessarily a bad thing. And a lot of Jungian work is about sitting with yourself, deep thought of contemplating, how am I? Who am I? What does my world feel? What is my body telling me? So that then you can make sense of who you are in the outer world. Our culture is very extroverted, even though only about 50% of people are extroverted. The values of the world are be out in the world, interact, socialize, be gregarious, spend your energy outward, and don't spend a lot of time resting, thinking, doing creative work, doing the contemplative inner work. So Jung thought that really the second half of life, which he thought started somewhere in the late 30s, maybe 40s, somewhere in there. You think about a lifespan, and if you were to say, okay, what's the second half, choose where that would be, is to do the inner work, is to look at, now that I have my footing in the world, who am I? One of the ways that Jungians do that is through dream work, through analysis. I'm going to give you a couple of things just so you have to reference it. One is a quote I'm going to read, and the other one is a link to This Jungian Life podcast. One of my favorite episodes that they did was on creative depression. And in this episode, they talk about how a lot of times depression can be a creative act that pulls all your energy inward to figure out who you are and what you want to do differently, so that when you rise up again from that kind of underworld place, you're going back into the world with something new. Whether it's rebuilding your sense of who you are, how you work in the world, or finding a new level of literal creativity. If you some of the stuff I do and you want to continue to fill up on Jungian thought, This Jungian Life is fabulous. This is from Collected Works 13. Basically, I say all the time that the symptoms of our bodies are how we connect to our soul. That our inner world is trying to give us information through what we often experience as symptoms. Jung is talking about this in response to when Nietzsche said that God is dead. That was a complete change in European culture and Western culture in general, of no longer looking to God outside, but, what is intellectualism if we're not taking God literally? And this is nuanced, but I wanted to read his words first before I talk about it. We think we can congratulate ourselves for having already reached such a pinnacle of clarity, imagining that we have left all these phantasmal gods far behind. But what we have left behind are only verbal specters, not the psychic facts that we are responsible for the birth of the gods. We are still as much possessed today by autonomous psychic contents as if they were Olympians. Today they are called phobias, obsessions, and so forth. In a word, neurotic symptoms. The gods have become diseases. Zeus no longer rules Olympus, but rather the solar plexus, and produces curious specimens for doctors' consulting rooms, or disorders the brains of politicians and journalists who unwittingly let loose psychic epidemics on the world. I think that is so timely. Of the things we project in the world, the things that our cultures unconsciously project on us as societies, and how we don't take the illness of the soul, of the psyche, seriously in a way that cuts us off from being able to learn from it. The idea of individuation is that when we are born, we have an innate pattern that comes with us. That James Hillman calls it the acorn theory. The book that I'm referring to is called The Soul's Code. The idea is that in an acorn, all of the information for a grand oak tree is encapsulated in that tiny little acorn. And a grand oak tree doesn't look anything like an acorn, but the potential is there. The pattern for one of those gigantic oak trees that's 400, 500 years old is in that acorn. Then what if we are all born with our own unique pattern? You see this often with savants who the first time they get in front of a piano or a violin, they take to it water. Or athletes that are going to become Olympians, first time a kid's on the ice, they're already dancing. The idea is that we all have our own unique pattern, that the unfolding of our potential is encapsulated within us the second that we're born. And that getting to a place where we heal the wounds and the trauma that might keep us from growing, whether it be that of a bonsai tree or being struck by lightning, or even growing up under another large tree that's blotting out all of the sun and it can't get big enough because it just doesn't have enough nutrients because the larger tree is taking all of the nutrients away. That's true for humans too. The more we look toward what our unfolding pattern is supposed to be from a uniquely us standpoint, the more we're working towards our destiny. That's called individuation. However, it's hard to see when we're looking forward into the future of what should I do next. It becomes much more apparent when we're looking back on the past. I'm going to give you a bunch of weird examples from my life because I don't have to worry about disclosing that. The more I get into this training, the weirder it gets. So I might as well share some of those pieces. I minored in anthropology in undergrad and majored in fine art. I went and did commercial insurance after that because I wanted a job and art was not a job. I was really annoyed for a little while that I had done anthropology instead of psychology because I had to take a bunch of prerequisites to go get my master's in art therapy. And I was, man, if I had minored in psychology, this would have been a lot easier. But now some of my professors are anthropologists at the Institute. Jung studied anthropology. It makes perfect sense that I have that in my educational repertoire now, but it didn't make sense for grad school. Here's other strange little examples. I kept a dream journal before I could really even spell anything. I was trying to do it at 8 and 9 years old. I read Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, which is Jung's autobiography, when I was 16, which no 16-year-old has any business reading that book. My mother thought it was extremely important for me to learn all the fairy tales when I was a little kid. She said, Maggie, this is important. You've got to learn these. She never said why. I'm not sure she knew why. I can't ask her. I wish I could. But it was very important now because I'm studying fairy tales at the Institute. One of my favorite memories with my dad was we used to listen to classic music on his record player. He taught me how to dance. We made puzzles together. The other thing that we would do is he had this panoramic book of photography that we would look through. And some of the pages were fold out, so they were really big. And the book was in German and French. So we never read it, but we just looked at the pictures. The book was of Switzerland. He got it at a yard sale somewhere. They were just pretty pictures, were they? Were they? I got into analysis when I was taking some courses with the Assisi Institute, which is an online multidisciplinary institute that studies dreams and archetypes. And I was in one of their dream courses, and I had a dream that scared the living crap out of me, honestly. We weren't allowed to talk about personal dreams in this class because they're just too personal. Dreams get you right down to your most vulnerable piece of you. It's not appropriate to share in the classroom setting because it's just too personal, because it's really psychological work. So I contacted my professor and I said, I know we're not allowed to share personal dreams, but I need to talk to you about this dream. I'm worried. There's other pieces in the dream that speak to my entire first analysis that I did with a Jungian analyst. It was 5 years worth of work, which is not important for this point. But what is important is in the dream, I have my largest suitcase with me. And I walk out onto a dock that goes out onto a lake. And suddenly I find myself in the lake. I blanked out and I was sinking in the lake. And in the dream, I wouldn't let go of my suitcase. I was sinking and sinking because it's huge. It's full of water. There's no way. A young man who looks a park ranger of some sort comes along in a little motorboat and pulls me and my luggage into the boat and saves me. Thank God for the young masculine energy, the animus, that had agency to get me out of drowning, to keep me from drowning. But it was really clear to me in the dream, if I don't deal with my baggage, it's going to take me out. I knew there was hope because somebody saved me in the dream. But it was also, would he have even been able to save me with that much luggage if I just wouldn't let go? I can swim. Why wouldn't I let go? The thing I wouldn't let go of, I needed to work on. So I spent the next 5 years with my analyst helping me take things out of the suitcase. I think she saved my life. There's that piece of it too. I had been through a bunch of therapists and they kept on saying, Maggie, you're really smart. You have coping skills. You're doing fine. You don't need therapy. Yet based on some of the things I had been through that was sitting there in the back of my head, I was like, I do need therapy, but I can't find a therapist that can handle it. I just wasn't getting it. So that led me to therapy, the dream.